Monsieur le ministre, Mesdames, Messieurs les ambassadeurs, distingués experts invités, Mesdames et Messieurs, en ma qualité de président du comité pour l'exercice des droits inaliénables du peuple de Palestine, je vous souhaite la bienvenue à cette conférence internationale organisée conformément aux résolutions 70-12 et 70-13 de l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies. Le thème de la conférence, vous le savez, est « La paix est possible », définir les orientations pour aller de l'avant. Dans le cadre de cet événement, le comité souhaite passer en revue certains enseignements tirés d'initiatives passées portant sur le processus de paix israélo-palestinien et évaluer les initiatives récentes lancées par les acteurs clés dans ce sens. La conférence doit aussi être l'occasion de favoriser un débat autour de nouvelles idées et orientations visant à trouver une solution durable au conflit. J'ai le plaisir d'inviter M. Michael Møller, directeur général de l'Office des Nations Unies à Genève et représentant du secrétaire général des Nations Unies, à prononcer le message adressé à la présente conférence par le secrétaire général, M. Ban Ki-moon. Monsieur Møller, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, Your Excellency, Mr. Nabeel Shaath, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the Palais des Nations here in Geneva for the International Conference in support of Israeli-Palestinian peace. The Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, has asked me to represent him at this important occasion, and it is my pleasure to read his message, and I quote, "I am pleased to send greetings to the participants of this international conference in support of Israeli-Palestinian peace. Your title is apt. Peace is possible. Frameworks for a way forward." There's not. You have to. Excuse me, let me check. Does it work? Okay. Let me know if it doesn't work. We must never give up hope of negotiating a settlement between Israel and Palestine. All that is lacking is the political will to make that happen. The international community's latest efforts to revitalize the peace process and seek to build international consensus towards a resumption of negotiations include the upcoming report of the Middle East Quartet and the recent French-led ministerial meeting. The Arab Peace Initiative, with its vision of a comprehensive peace and an opportunity to build a regional security framework, can also be an important forum for dialogue. I have just made my 11th visit to Israel and Palestine. During my trip, I reminded the leadership on both sides of the imperative of taking prompt action to restore hope in a peaceful future and to preserve the two-state solution, the only way to meet the national aspirations of both peoples. Israel's settlement enterprise, illegal under international law, continues to expand in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, undermining trust and constituting a significant threat to a viable Palestinian state. The continued designation of land in Area C for exclusive Israeli use, the steady expansion of settlements, the legalization of outposts, and the alarming spike in demolitions in 2016 are systematically jeopardizing the viability of a future Palestinian state, raise serious concerns about Israel's commitment to the two-state vision. Violence and the incitement that fuels it also present a major obstacle to rebuilding trust and restoring faith in a negotiated solution. There can be no justification for terrorism, nor for the glorification of those who commit such heinous acts. Palestinian leadership must live up to its responsibility to speak clearly and act firmly against violence and incitement. Israelis and Palestinians alike are entitled to live in security, free from constant fear and threats. And I'm encouraged by the reduction in attacks against Israelis over the past few months. Israel must calibrate its response to avoid unnecessarily harming civilians in accordance with its obligations under international law. Turning to Gaza, the situation there is untenable. 9 years of closures and 3 rounds of hostilities between Israel and militant groups operating from Gaza have exacerbated the vast humanitarian challenges. Most Palestinians in Gaza need international humanitarian aid in the face of crisis in housing, electricity and water, and a lack of sustainable development. It is critical that donors fulfill their financial pledges for the reconstruction of Gaza. Hamas must end its military build-up and the construction of tunnels, which undermine humanitarian efforts and increase the risk of renewed violence. I call again on the Israeli government to end its closure of Gaza in line with the Security Council Resolution 1860, and I also urge Egypt to reopen the Rafah crossing on a regular basis, particularly for humanitarian cases, while respecting its legitimate security concerns. Reuniting the West Bank and Gaza under a single, legitimate and democratic Palestinian government based on PLO principles is critical, not only to relieving the suffering of the Palestinian people in Gaza, but to empowering Palestinian leadership to negotiate a resolution to the conflict. The United Nations remains committed to supporting a negotiated, just, comprehensive and enduring two-state resolution for the people of Israel and Palestine. I personally commit to working with their leaders and the international community to advance their essential goals until the last day of my tenure as Secretary General of the United Nations. In this spirit, please accept my best wishes for a successful event that looks at past peace initiatives and lessons learned, current peace initiatives, and the way forward. That is the end of the message of the Secretary General, and I join the Secretary General in wishing you a successful event and hope that the spirit of International Geneva, the city of peace, will be conducive to a fruitful conference. Thank you very much.
Je vous remercie, M. Møller, d'avoir accepté de représenter le secrétaire général à cette conférence. Je vous remercie aussi d'avoir bien voulu mettre à notre disposition cette belle salle rénovée par les soins des États des Émirats arabes unis. Je vous prie de bien vouloir transmettre à M. le secrétaire général notre reconnaissance pour son message et pour son appui sans faille au comité dans l'exercice de son mandat. J'aimerais à présent faire une déclaration en tant que président du comité et en tant que président de la délégation du comité qui est composée, cette délégation, de son Excellence l'ambassadeur Maria Ribres de Chamorro, représentante permanente du Nicaragua auprès de l'Organisation des Nations Unies et vice-présidente du comité, Monsieur l'ambassadeur Wilfred Mvula, représentant permanent de la Namibie auprès de l'Organisation des Nations Unies et vice-président du comité, l'ambassadeur Dian Tiresiadjani, représentant permanent de l'Indonésie auprès de l'Organisation des Nations Unies, vice-président du comité, et l'ambassadeur Riyad Mansour, observateur permanent de l'État de Palestine auprès de l'Organisation des Nations Unies. Mesdames et messieurs, depuis sa création en 1975, le comité n'a eu de cesse de promouvoir la réalisation des droits inaliénables du peuple palestinien, notamment son droit à l'autodétermination, à l'indépendance et au retour des réfugiés. Compte tenu de la détérioration continue des conditions de vie des Palestiniens, le comité a intensifié ses activités d'appui et de sensibilisation en faveur d'une cessation immédiate de l'occupation israélienne pour une solution prévoyant 2 États vivant côte à côte et en paix, avec comme frontière celle de 1967. Le comité œuvre parallèlement pour un règlement juste de toutes les questions relatives au statut final et pour une mobilisation de l'aide internationale en faveur du peuple palestinien, car le comité est d'avis que l'occupation israélienne, qui dure depuis près de 60 ans maintenant, est l'une des causes profondes de l'instabilité chronique qui afflige la région et se propage bien au-delà avec ses corollaires d'extrémisme violent et de terrorisme. Dans la poursuite de ces objectifs, le comité a travaillé sans relâche pour que la question de Palestine reste au premier rang des priorités de la communauté internationale, organisant pour cela de nombreuses conférences, dont la dernière en date s'est tenue à Dakar les 3 et 4 mai derniers, avec pour thème « Jérusalem au cœur du règlement pacifique de la question palestinienne ». La réunion d'aujourd'hui a pour thème, on le répète, la paix est possible, définir des orientations pour aller de l'avant. Un sujet particulièrement opportun si l'on tient compte notamment du rapport que doit produire prochainement le Quatuor, composé, comme on le sait, par les États-Unis, la Fédération de Russie, l'Union européenne et l'Organisation des Nations unies. Compte tenu également de l'initiative française en faveur de la paix au Proche-Orient, lancée par Paris au début de ce mois, mais aussi compte tenu du regain d'intérêt que suscite l'initiative de paix arabe. Le comité appuie sans réserve ces initiatives internationales qu'il voit comme complémentaires parce qu'elles participent à la relance d'un processus de paix sur lequel reposent les espoirs des peuples palestiniens et israéliens. Ce n'est pas hasard si nous avons choisi d'organiser cette conférence à Genève, capitale mondiale de la paix, qui a accueilli et qui continue d'accueillir tant de négociations de paix. Mesdames et messieurs, les activités d'implantation illégale menées par le gouvernement israélien en Cisjordanie et à Jérusalem-Est et la violence dont font montre les colons, spoliant et brutalisant les Palestiniens, sapent décidément la confiance entre les deux peuples et vont à l'encontre du principe même de la solution à 2 États. Le comité exhorte donc Israël à faire cesser ces activités d'implantation sur le territoire palestinien occupé, qui est internationalement reconnu comme faisant partie intégrante d'un futur État palestinien indépendant. Parallèlement, les attaques aveugles contre les civils doivent cesser immédiatement. Tant les Israéliens que les Palestiniens ont le droit de vivre sans se sentir constamment en danger. Le comité se réjouit que le nombre de tirs de roquettes en provenance de Gaza et d'attaques au couteau contre les Israéliens ait diminué ces derniers points. Toutefois, le risque d'escalade de la violence continuera d'exister aussi longtemps que les territoires palestiniens seront occupés, en particulier Jérusalem-Est, et aussi longtemps que le statu quo concernant les lieux saints sera miné et que la bande de Gaza restera soumise à un blocus asphyxiant. Parlant précisément de Gaza, le comité est particulièrement préoccupé par l'impact combiné, les catastrophiques, de plusieurs guerres et de 9 années de sanctions paralysantes qui ont rendu une majorité des Palestiniens de la bande de Gaza entièrement tributaires de l'aide internationale, qui a anéanti une économie autrefois florissante et qui a remis en cause la viabilité à long terme du territoire dont la dégradation continue de l'écosystème est insoutenable. Aussi, le comité engage-t-il le gouvernement israélien à mettre fin au blocus de Gaza, conformément aux dispositions de la résolution 1860 de 2009 du Conseil de sécurité, et à lever l'embargo sur les importations, en particulier sur les produits indispensables à la vie quotidienne des Palestiniens. Les récents efforts qui ont conduit à une reprise des importations privées de ciment dans la bande de Gaza doivent être salués, mais ils sont insuffisants, loin d'être suffisants. Le comité exhorte vivement les donateurs à honorer leurs engagements financiers, notamment ceux pris à la conférence du Caire en 2014 en faveur de la reconstruction de la bande de Gaza. Le comité lance également un appel urgent à la réconciliation interpalestinienne, car il ne sera réellement possible de mettre définitivement fin aux souffrances du peuple palestinien et d'instaurer la solution à 2 États que lorsque la bande de Gaza et la Cisjordanie seront réunies sous la houlette d'un gouvernement palestinien unique, légitime et responsable. Le comité reste déterminé à œuvrer à la fin de l'occupation pour voir naître un État palestinien indépendant dans les frontières de 1967, avec Jérusalem-Est comme capitale, aux côtés d'un État israélien où la sécurité est assurée. Le comité ne relâchera point ses efforts que lorsque ce projet, fondé sur le droit international et les résolutions pertinentes des Nations Unies, sera devenu réalité. Les conditions d'un règlement final sont connues depuis très longtemps. Il suffit que la communauté internationale donne l'impulsion nécessaire pour que se réalise ce projet. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, j'ai maintenant le plaisir de souhaiter la bienvenue à Son Excellence M. Nabeel Shaath, membre du comité central du Fatah et représentant de l'État de la Palestine à cette conférence. Excellence, vous avez la parole.
Mr. Møller, Mr. Seck, distinguished representatives on the forum here and present in this meeting, ladies and gentlemen, it really gives me great pleasure to be here amongst you. I was honored by invitation, and I carry the greetings of President Abu Mazen Mahmoud Abbas, the President of Palestine. Greetings to you, particularly to the Committee on the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, and to the Senegal, which have maintained its leadership from its very beginning, to the United Nations, which have created this committee as a proof of its commitment to the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people and its support of a peace process that will assure the implementation of these rights of the people, ending occupation of Palestine, creating an independent Palestinian state on the borders of 1967 with East Jerusalem its capital, and resolving the issue of Palestinian refugees based on international legality and the relevant resolution of the United Nations. All of this has been really on the agenda, and I was honored of attending many meetings held by the UN Committee on the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, and the Americas. I know and I appreciate very much the commitment made by Mr. Fodé Seck today about their willingness to continue their action until the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people are restored, including the right of return. I know that the slogan of this conference is "Peace is possible," and I know it is possible. Today, Mr. Ban Ki-moon is in Palestine. He just visited Gaza and observed the tragedy of Gaza that has just been mentioned by Mr. Seck. It's a particularly horrifying tragedy to note that the UNDP's statement is that by 2020 Gaza will not be fit for human beings to survive in Gaza. Questions of water, environment, resources, unemployment, closure, and many other poverty, many other problems, particularly the draconic siege of Gaza by the Israelis and the separation of Gaza from the West Bank and Jerusalem. All of this, I'm sure Mr. Ban Ki-moon has observed while in Gaza and talked with President Abu Mazen in Ramallah after his visit. And I trust his commitment. I trust the commitment of the United Nations in general. I think without a pivotal role for the United Nations and the international community, peace is not possible. It is possible if there is a serious contribution by the international community, particularly crystallized in a very important role for the United Nations that may be able to bring about that peace. Without this, peace is very difficult. The Israeli government is not committed to peace based on a two-state solution. And sometimes I wonder, it is not also committed on another suggestion, another idea presented by the Palestinians of a one-state solution. The two ideas, were Palestinians' commitment not to have a solution based on either of us, or the Israelis. No, on both people living in that holy land that is holy to all of us, either as one democratic, secular, non-sectarian, progressive state that includes all Jews, Christians, and Muslims, like the way it is in Europe, in America, in South Africa, and many other places in the world, or two states based on the border of 1967, but two states that achieves the right of the Palestinians to self-determination, independence, freedom, and return, living in peace with the Israelis in the state of Palestine. To talk about two states, one state is there, and it occupies the potential land of the other state. And without ending that occupation, there can be a no-state solution. And getting occupiers to abandon their occupation has been extremely impossible without international intervention and implementation of international law, or by catastrophe. I mean, probably India and most of Africa may have continued to be under the British occupation had it not been for World War II. And without serious intervention by the international community, by boycott of South African apartheid system, the apartheid system might have continued up till today. And therefore, without a serious contribution by the international community, particularly crystallized by the role of the United Nations, I don't think it is possible. Israel has negotiated and signed agreements with Egypt, with Jordan, was on the verge of signing one with Syria, and abandoned its occupation of Lebanon without an agreement, except for Palestine. With all of these Arab neighbors whose land was occupied by Israel in 1967, Israel's slogan with them was land for peace. It returned the land, and peace was achieved with Egypt and with Jordan in particular. But with the Palestinians, it was never land for peace. It was self-rule for peace, some economic advantages for peace. There was never a real willingness by the Israelis to recognize a state of Palestine and to achieve an end result, a permanent settlement with the Palestinians based on a two-state solution. Even with Mr. Rabin, the Israeli father of peace on the Israeli side, without him, possibly the Oslo Agreement would not have been possible. But even he never thought of an independent Palestinian state. It was always self-rule plus in his last speech in the Knesset. Self-rule plus, but never a state. And without Jerusalem as the capital of the two states. For the Likud leadership of Israel, the whole idea is replacement of the Palestinian people in the West Bank and marginalization and total siege of Gaza. And therefore, without really reaching a permanent settlement based on a two-state solution, there can be really no peace. But is that impossible? Of course not. It is possible. It is possible. And without international community serious involvement, no, it is not possible. It's only possible when there is a will, when there is a peace camp in Israel and in Palestine, of course, when there is a leadership in Palestine and Israel who want this to happen, of course. But when this is not achieved, then the role of the international community becomes supreme, becomes irreplaceable. Without it, it cannot be done. And that is really the present problem that we have. During 23 years of the Oslo Agreement signed in Washington with the serious presence of the United States President and Vice President and past presidents and many other leaders of the world. In these 23 years, we do not have an independent state. There is no end of occupation by the Israelis. On the contrary, what has happened is that the colonial settlement project has expanded horizontally and vertically. And that has happened with every peace process that Israel signed with its Arab neighbors. In 1979, when the Camp David Accords were signed between Egypt and Israel, 13 years after the occupation of 1967, there was only 20,000 colonial settlers in the West Bank in Gaza. When they signed the Camp David Agreement, there was an understanding that they will stop building settlements. On the contrary, between 1979 and 1993, when we signed the Oslo Agreement, there have become 160,000 colonial settlers. And when we signed Oslo, up till today, 23 years have passed, the colonial settlers have become 680,000. In other words, they quadrupled during a period where colonial settlement should have ended and occupation should have ended. During that period, the areas, the so-called Area C, in which Israel retained control under the Oslo Agreement temporarily, today has 400,000 colonial settlers and only 100,000 Palestinians. 92% of the water of the West Bank is used by these settlers, and 8% of the water is used by 4.5 million Palestinians. There can be absolutely no hope that you can achieve peace if that continues. If the colonial settlement program continues, if the continued control by Israel of all the life of the Palestinians, if the separation between Gaza and the West Bank and the siege of the West Bank of Gaza continues, if the separation of Jerusalem from the West Bank and Jerusalem from Gaza continues, if this continues, no, peace is not possible. And yet, my government, my president, my people believe it should be possible, and the hope should remain for it. And our hope eventually that there will again be an Israeli peace camp like the one that existed in the early 90s that might create eventually a leadership in Israel that wants that peace and works for it. But until that happens, our hope is based on the international commitment and the role of the international community, and particularly the United Nations. We have supported the French initiative, which has become, and we still support it, which have become a European initiative, and in Paris has become really an international initiative, attended by the Russians, the Americans, the Europeans, the Chinese, and many other countries. And we feel that maybe we have learned something about why our peace process have failed and why it has succeeded with the Iranian negotiations. I think just looking at these two would give you a feel of what needs to be done. The Iranian negotiation was an international negotiation, whereas our negotiation was always chaperoned by, quote unquote, the American honest broker, who never really, as a serious and a strategic ally of Israel, never put any real pressure on the Israelis to implement what was signed and chaperoned by the Americans. In Iran, it was an international forum that negotiated with Iran and reached a solution to the nuclear problem. In the Iranian negotiation, they addressed the end result first, and when they agreed on the end result, they went into the interim arrangements of monitoring and of ending the sanctions against Iran. But in Palestine, it is always an interim agreement. It was always a gradual agreement. Interimness allowed the Israelis to continue their control of the land and the resources and the people and the security and the border and the economy, which made it impossible to reach an independent state. In Iran, there were sanctions on the Iranians of $280 billion. These sanctions played a role in making the Iranians recalculate, and their recalculation helped bring about a solution. With Israel, people very much hesitate on talking about sanctions to get the Israelis to recalculate, as the cost of their occupation of Palestine today is zero. They do not pay any of the cost. The cost of running the occupied territory is shared by the Palestinians and the international donor community, with very, very little cost to the Israelis in their calculation about ending occupation or deepening occupation by colonial settlement. So in Iran, no, this was different, and it really helped and worked out. In Iran, there were clear international law guided terms of reference and resort to international organizations, particularly for monitoring the nuclear weapons and so on. Without that, it will be very difficult to reach an agreement in Palestine. And therefore, I would like to conclude by saying the following. We have not given up the peace process. How can we give it up? There is no other alternative. There is no alternative. The Palestinian people today are 6.5 million inside the land of Palestine, in Israel and the West Bank and Gaza. And there are 6.5 million Jewish Israelis, at almost the same number in that territory. The Palestinians are in their land. They are not going anywhere. And the Israelis are not going anywhere. So if the two people are to live on that holy land together, there are only one of two solutions: either to accept to live in one democratic state, or to accept to live in two sovereign states side by side. There is no other solution. And therefore, we have to work very hard to bring about that solution. We have to use our experience learned about the mistakes made in the Oslo Agreement and other agreements that allowed colonial settlement to flourish instead of building the infrastructure of an independent Palestinian state. With this might bring back a peace camp in Israel. This will help the Palestinians achieve their unity. This will help end the despair, and by ending the despair, ending the violence. This will stop building new colonial settlement and make it possible to move to real negotiations leading to peace. In all of these, we rely on the United Nations. We rely also on the commitment of the Israeli and Palestinian people to eventually have peace based on international acceptance and on international terms of reference. Yes, it is possible, and we should never abandon hope, and we should work very hard not to repeat mistakes. By doing so, we will make that dream come true in the Holy Land, which I think is the most coveted peace process the world has ever entertained. I'm here in this meeting with the hope that this meeting will also contribute to making it possible. Thank you very much.
Je remercie Son Excellence M. Shaath d'avoir accepté de représenter le président Abbas à cette conférence importante. Le message du président Mahmoud Abbas témoigne de la volonté du gouvernement palestinien à poursuivre par tous les moyens pacifiques possibles pour arriver à la réalisation des deux États vivant côte à côte en paix et en sécurité. Permettez-moi, M. Shaath, de saisir cette opportunité pour exprimer par votre entremise à Son Excellence Mahmoud Abbas, président de l'État de Palestine et président du comité exécutif de l'Organisation de libération de la Palestine, les assurances de notre respect et de notre solidarité en ce moment crucial pour l'avancement de la paix. J'ai le plaisir maintenant de donner la parole à Son Excellence l'ambassadeur Samir Bakr, secrétaire général adjoint de l'Organisation de coopération islamique. Monsieur Bakr, vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Excellency, the representative of the United Nations Secretary General, Your Excellency, Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs, Mr. Chairman Fodé Seck, Dr. Nabeel Shaath, representative of the Palestinian Authority and representative of President Mahmoud Abbas, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, allow me to express OIC's appreciation for the efforts undertaken by the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian people, and for its chairman, Ambassador Fodé Seck, and all the members of its bureau, for their diligent action in support of the just cause of Palestine. I wish also to avail myself of this opportunity to pay tribute to the UN General Secretariat's Division for Palestinian Rights for their commendable efforts to ensure the success of this meeting. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we meet today to talk about the necessity and possibility of peace in the Middle East. While the occupied Palestinian territory have been witnessing seriously deteriorated situation as a result of the escalation of Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people and their holy places, which is adding worrying reasons that complicate the outlook and the credibility and significance of peace efforts. It is needless to say that Israel's lack of commitment to its obligations, maintaining the status quo, procrastination, persistence in carrying out its racist policies and unilateral practices, and rejection of the Arab Peace Initiative that was proposed over 14 years ago, along with the absence of end-of-game parameters, time frame, and international terms of reference, are among other factors that have contributed to the impasse of the peace process. Therefore, the OIC has repeatedly drawn the international community's attention to Israel's colonial settlement policy, while Israel still controls 62% of the West Bank lands. This policy has led to an increase in the number of Israeli settlers to about 700,000 settlers in 2016, of whom 350,000 live in 16 settlements in and around East Jerusalem. The credibility of peace efforts undermined the contiguity of and viability of a state of Palestine and jeopardizes the prospects for realization of the two-state solution. We should stress that the colonial settlement activities cannot be seen in isolation from the Israeli occupation racist measures and illegal practices and policies aimed at altering the demographic and geographic features of East Jerusalem, distorting its Arabic character and its religious and historic status, and isolating it from its Palestinian environs. In this regard, the OIC reiterates that such acts constitute a flagrant violation of the international law and UN resolutions and threaten to fuel a religious conflict which endangers international peace and security prospects. On more than an occasion, the OIC emphasized that it is no longer morally accepted for the international community to remain silent or only express condemnation and concern about the unspeakable Israeli war crimes and atrocities that have been committed against the Palestinian people. We believe that the attainment of regional peace and stability requires serious intervention from the international community to maintain and realize the two-state solution. In this regard, the fifth extraordinary summit on Palestine that the OIC held in Jakarta on 7th of March 2016 expressed its full support for the current French initiative, which seeks to establish international support group and convene a international peace conference and to launch a multilateral political process. The OIC believes that mobilizing international support for the Palestinian move in the UN Security Council to adopt a resolution confirming the legitimate Palestinian rights and condemn the Israeli settlement activities, along with mobilizing further international recognition of the state of Palestine, would contribute to maintain and realize the two-state solution. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the immensity of the Israeli violations of international law, which has exceeded all limits, commands a different brand of international intervention. It is not acceptable that Israel continues to conduct itself as if it were a state above the law, pertaining its exactions fearless of any response and with full impunity. It is therefore an international responsibility for all the states and institutions to deal with these Israeli violations on the basis that they form a threat to international peace and security. Failure to embrace peace means a human tragedy yet to be endured by the Palestinian people who have been living under the unjust burden of Israeli occupation, while Israel is trapped in a situation where over time sharpens their international isolation and boycott and deepens its apartheid system and policies. In conclusion, I would like to avail myself of this opportunity to reiterate the OIC's support for the Palestinian people in their endeavors to recover their legitimate and inalienable rights, including the right to return, self-determination, and to the concrete establishment of their independent state of Palestine on the territory occupied since 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital. Thank you.
Je remercie l'ambassadeur Bakr d'avoir accepté de représenter le secrétaire général de l'OCI et d'avoir livré son message. Les ambassadeurs, permettez-moi d'appeler à présent votre attention sur le programme de la conférence que le secrétariat vous a distribué et de décrire en quelques mots l'organisation de nos travaux. À 13h30, les représentants de l'État de Palestine et moi-même inviterons les journalistes dans la salle de conférence 1 pour une conférence de presse. À 15h cet après-midi se tiendra la première séance plénière consacrée aux enseignements tirés depuis Madrid. Cette séance sera présidée par l'ambassadeur María Ribrales de Chamorro du Nicaragua, vice-président. Par la suite, j'aurai l'honneur de vous inviter en tant que président à une réception ce soir à 18h30 au restaurant des délégués au 8e étage du bâtiment A. Et demain à 10h, nous examinerons en deuxième séance plénière les nouvelles approches en vue de résoudre le conflit israélo-palestinien. Cette deuxième séance sera présidée par son Excellence M. l'ambassadeur Mboula, représentant permanent de la Namibie et vice-président du comité. Toujours dans la journée de demain, à 15h, aura lieu la troisième séance plénière visant à proposer des pistes innovantes pour sortir du conflit, séance qui sera présidée par l'ambassadeur Diani, représentant permanent de l'Indonésie et vice-président du comité. La séance de clôture de cette conférence est prévue demain à 17h30. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, nous allons donner la parole aux représentants des gouvernements et des organismes intergouvernementaux qui ont des messages à livrer. Le premier intervenant sur ma liste est le ministre des Affaires étrangères. C'est la ministre des Affaires étrangères des Maldives, Madame Dunia Mamoun. Madame la ministre, vous avez la parole.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me offer my sincere condolences to the Turkish government and the Turkish people. We condemned the heinous attack at the Ataturk airport last night. It is an honor for the Republic of Maldives to be addressing this meeting. On behalf of President Abdullah Yamin Abdul Qayyum, the government and the people of Maldives, I would like to thank the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People for organizing this important international conference in support of Palestine-Israeli peace. Let me also express our gratitude to you, Mr. Chair, the representative of the Secretary General and the representative of the State of Palestine, for your most thought-provoking remarks. Mr. Chair, the Government of Maldives reiterates its strong and unwavering support for the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people. We remain convinced of the two-state solution based on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as the capital of the State of Palestine. We have repeatedly called for an end to the long years of occupation spanning more than 7 decades. The years and years of discontent, violence, aggression, and repeated suffering have clouded and blocked out any hope of peace, any prospects of stability, to the point where we have lost sight of the only aspect that matters in this situation: the people. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights first declared its commitment not just to the principle that all persons have certain inalienable rights, but that they possess equal claim to these rights. The unequivocal acceptance of this fact is the most basic requirement for lasting peace. Then, and only then, will there be peace. If peace is to be sustainable, it must be rooted in mutual respect between peoples, respect for their needs, aspiration, and fundamental rights. Unfortunately, such respect remains woefully scarce, as evident in the treatment of Palestinians and the alarming actions in the occupied territories. Israel, the occupying power of Palestine, has systematically violated the rights of the Palestinian people with a degree of totality that has few parallels in the world. The Palestinian people must, on a daily basis, contend with restrictions on the exercise of some of their most basic rights and freedoms: freedom of thought, of expression, of movement, from protection from dehumanizing treatment, the right to an education, to housing, to property, to name just a few. The Human Rights Council has addressed matters of such gravity wherever human rights are violated elsewhere, and we would like to see that this council, or the Human Rights Council, gives increased attention to the plight of the Palestinian people who are continuously being oppressed. The rights of the Palestinian people to life, liberty, and security continue to be impeded, in particular due to the continued excessive use of force in occupied Palestine. Humanitarian agencies continue to face significant impediments to assisting those affected by violence in Palestine as a result of restrictions imposed by the Israeli authorities. There has been a dramatic increase in the demolition of Palestinian-owned structures in the West Bank. In addition to homes and other civilian structures, Palestinian schools, clinics, and other humanitarian facilities have been targeted and demolished with little or no advance warning, often in the middle of the night. Israel, in its occupation of the Palestinian territories, continues to act in a manner that hampers the promotion of peace. Instead of fostering mutual understanding and respect, Israel's policies have propagated mutual resentment and mistrust. There is a generation of Palestinian children growing up today having known nothing but violence. Injustice and oppression sow the seeds of hatred and makes possible the spread of extremist sentiment. Israel's actions ultimately serve to perpetuate the very violence from which it maintains it must defend its people. The Maldives stands with the people of Palestine. We call on the international community to help ascertain the basic human rights of the Palestinians. We call to do what is just, right, and required, and we continue to hope for lasting peace and a durable solution to the situation in Palestine and the Middle East. I thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Je remercie Madame la ministre des Affaires étrangères des Maldives et je donne la parole à son Excellence M. Ivan Jurkovic, chef de délégation de la délégation du Saint-Siège. Ambassadeur Jurkovic, vous avez la parole.
Mr. Chair, the lack of substantive negotiations taking place lately, the spiraling of acts of violence, and serious doubts about the continued validity of Oslo Accords not only demonstrate that the Palestinian question has not been solved, but on the contrary, they seem to indicate that it is becoming increasingly intractable. In recent years, over other very serious conflicts, in particular the Syrian tragedy, have added to the complexity of the problems in the region. The Holy See has always favored the two-state solution. Pope Benedict reaffirmed these principles during his 2009 visit of the Holy Land when he said, "Let it be universally recognized that the State of Israel has the right to exist and to enjoy peace and security within internationally agreed borders. Let it be likewise acknowledged that the Palestinian people have a right to a sovereign independent homeland, to live with dignity and to travel freely. Let the two-state solution become a reality, not remain a dream." Pope Francis reiterated the same principle in Bethlehem in 2014 when he affirmed, "The time has come to everyone to find the courage and be generous and creative in the service of the common good, the courage to forge a peace which rests on the acknowledgement by all of the right of two states to exist and to live in peace and security within internationally recognized borders." The time is long overdue to put an end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which has become increasingly unacceptable. Mr. Chair, the Holy See believes that the peace process between Israelis and Palestinians can move forward only if it's directly negotiated by the parties with the strong support of the international community as this international conference is meant to catalyze. The Holy See believes that the whole peace process does not depend solely on formal negotiation, no matter how indispensable they are. Peace cannot be achieved if healing and reconciliation, mutual recognition and respect at the personal and communitarian levels do not accompany political solutions. For this reason, my delegation is pleased that this conference is going to consider the role of civil society and track to diplomacy in taking stock of the next steps in the peace process. Mr. Chair, the Middle East should be a fertile ground for civil society and track to diplomacy, including faith-based informal diplomacy. As a cradle of great civilization and birthplace of the three main monotheistic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the Middle East is fit to foster the involvement of civil society and track to diplomacy in peacemaking and peace building. Religions and believers, in particular, must prove themselves worthy of their rightful place in the whole process of pacification in the region. They must put an end to mutual hatred that is lending credence to a clash of civilizations. My delegation believes that the more religion is manipulated to justify acts of terror and violence, the more religious leaders must be engaged in the overall effort to defeat the violence that attempts to hijack it. Spurious religious favor must be countered by authentic religious instruction and by the example of authentic communities of faith. In this regard, the Holy See reiterates its appeal to all religious leaders to denounce and reject every spurious form and perversion of religion, to foment violence, and to hold on the conviction that peace is not only possible and desirable, but it is our common call and duty. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie l'ambassadeur Jirkovic du Saint-Siège. Je donne la parole à l'ambassadeur Mehmet Ferden Karici, ambassadeur de la République de Turquie. Monsieur l'ambassadeur, si vous avez la parole.
Mr. Chairman, Excellency Mr. Shaath, distinguished participants. I would like to express our deep appreciation to the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People for organizing this timely conference in Geneva. Along with the ongoing session of the Human Rights Council, we believe that this will be another occasion for exchanging views on the situation in Palestine, as well as on various initiatives aiming for a lasting peace in the region. There is no justification for the fact that while the Israelis founded their state in 1948, Palestinians still remain deprived of this fundamental right for several decades. Until this injustice is completely reversed, it will not be possible to find a just and lasting solution to the Palestinian issue. Turkey's unwavering support to the honorable cause of the Palestinian people against occupation and destruction will continue with all means available. It is our foremost wish to witness the establishment of an independent, sovereign, and contiguous state of Palestine within the pre-1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital, on the basis of the international law, relevant UN resolutions, and the Arab Peace Initiative, living side by side in peace and security with the State of Israel. In this vein, as an active and one of the longest-standing members, we strongly support the efforts of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People in defense of the fundamental rights and freedoms of the people of Palestine, particularly the right to have an independent and sovereign state recognized by the international community. Turkey considers that the hoisting of the Palestinian flag at the UN last year was a long-awaited accomplishment of a fully deserved right. Also, the number of countries recognizing the state of Palestine has reached 137. Nevertheless, its existence is increasingly challenged on the ground by the occupation, which will soon mark its 50th year. Turkey supports the French initiative for the reactivation of the peace process, as well as other international efforts. However, a wide range of practices continue to hamper the dynamics of peace. Illegal practices in the occupied Palestinian territories should cease, and a sincere and result-oriented engagement with the peace process should follow. In particular, Turkey remains deeply concerned by the ongoing expansion of Israeli settlements, as well as by demolitions and land confiscations, and the prevailing culture of impunity fostered by the occupation itself. Likewise, regarding the growing numbers of settlers allowed to enter Al-Haram al-Sharif, Turkey is adamant that the preservation of the status and sanctity of the compound is essential. Moreover, the dismal effects of the 10-year-long blockade in Gaza have further deepened since 2013. Gaza carries the risk to become completely inhabitable in a few years' time. A genuine reconstruction process in Gaza can only be launched after the end of this injustice. Turkey once again calls for the lifting of the blockade. In Palestine, the need for development assistance and investment in key areas is more urgent than ever. The priority should be to empower the people of Palestine and to improve their living conditions. With this understanding, Turkey's recent pledge of $200 million is being progressively channeled into specific projects, such as the new industrial zone in Jenin and the Turkish-Palestinian hospital in Gaza. The people of Palestine urgently need a solid perspective for a brighter future. The realization of the two-state peace vision is the only viable way forward. To this end, Turkey will resolutely deploy all efforts for a just, lasting, and comprehensive settlement. Before I conclude, Mr. Chairman, let me also thank all delegations and officials who expressed their solidarity with Turkey before and during this conference. I thank you.
Je remercie l'ambassadeur de Turquie. Je donne la parole à Madame Anayansi Rodriguez Camejo, ambassadeur de Cuba. Madame l'ambassadeur, vous avez la parole.
Thank you very much, Chair. His Excellency Mr. Nabeel Shaath, representative of the State of Palestine. His Excellency Mr. Michael Møller, Director General of the United Nations Office at Geneva and representative of the UN Secretary General. Esteemed Ambassador Seck, Chairman of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. Distinguished ambassadors and delegates. Achieving the cessation of conflicts and peacekeeping requires solidarity, cooperation, and renewed and systematic international assistance from the United Nations and all its member states, which also includes, in this case, demanding the occupying power the recognition of the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of the state of Palestine. Despite the repeated discussions on this subject held in different organs and agencies of the United Nations, including the Security Council, the Human Rights Council, and other fora and UN agencies which have registered these issues as a permanent point of attention in their respective agendas, Israel, the occupying power, has not put an end to its aggressive policies and colonizing practices, war crimes, and collective punishment committed against the Palestinian people, who are prevented from exercising their fundamental human rights, all of which constitute a threat to regional and international peace and security. My delegation once again reiterates its strong condemnation of the Israeli colonization campaign in the occupied Palestinian territories and all measures, policies, and practices associated with that campaign, which in fact violate the international law, the international humanitarian law, and the UN resolutions. The international community is calling on the United Nations to fulfill its responsibility and make every effort to take the necessary decisions to end the various forms of aggression against the Palestinian people, including actions that qualified as state terrorism, practiced by Israel in open disrespect on the provisions of numerous resolutions of the UN General Assembly. The aforementioned actions threaten the viability of a Palestinian state and the ability to find a fair and balanced solution. Mr. Chairman, it is urgent to achieve a final, just, and lasting peace for all peoples in the Middle East. And in that context, we cannot allow the Palestinian cause remains ignored. Cuba recognized the efforts made so far for initiatives aimed at resolving this situation, but at the same time reiterates that a solution, to be truly viable and sustainable, must include an end to the Israeli occupation, the promotion of the peaceful coexistence of two independent states based on the establishment of the sovereign state of Palestine, with its capital in East Jerusalem and according to the pre-1967 borders, as well as a fair solution to the problem of Palestinian refugees. We also express our full support for the right of the State of Palestine to become a full member of the United Nations, and regret that this aspiration remains hampered by Israel's allies, which, with their silence and complicity attitude, guarantee the impunity of its actions and the persistence of the status quo, which is unacceptable. The historic debt with the Palestinian people is enormous and must be paid. The international community must take concrete and immediate actions to end such prolonged injustice. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Je remercie l'ambassadeur représentant permanent de Cuba de sa déclaration et je donne la parole à son Excellence M. Thani Tongpakdi, ambassadeur représentant permanent de la Thaïlande. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank the organizers for this forward-looking conference in support of Israeli-Palestinian peace. The theme of the conference is very encouraging, and I wish to join other participants in their belief that peace is possible, and we are here to discuss and find the frameworks for a way forward to make it a reality. Thailand believes that the long-standing conflict in the Middle East has claimed too many lives and deprived many young generations of a bright future. As a friend of both Israel and Palestine, Thailand fully supports the advancement of the two-state solution, which two states live side by side in peace, harmony, and prosperity. We believe that solutions can be achieved only through political means, namely negotiations between Palestine and Israel. We urge both sides to genuinely commit to the path of negotiation and to reinvigorate the peace process so as to achieve a comprehensive solution to this decades-long conflict without further delay. Furthermore, the international community needs to ensure an atmosphere conducive for constructive talks, as well as to provide incentives to persuade the two sides to bring about a peaceful solution. In this connection, we strongly support the continued efforts of the UN Secretary General and regional leaders to normalize the situation on the ground. We believe that the Quartet and the Arab Peace Initiative can play a crucial role to contribute to progress towards the resumption of the peace process. Thailand calls upon all parties to respect international law, in particular international human rights law and international humanitarian law. We also urge the implementation of the relevant UN Security Council and UNGA resolutions in this regard. We share the international concern of daily hardship faced by Palestinians and the devastating impact of conflict on their lives. In this connection, we urge all parties concerned to respect the civilian nature of refugee camps and facilitate humanitarian assistance to those in need. Humanitarian assistance is always at the core of the Kingdom of Thailand's foreign policy. Since 1978, Thailand has consistently supported the work of the UNRWA in responding to the needs of Palestinian refugees. Moreover, we have assisted Palestine through a variety of bilateral and trilateral cooperation programs. We have been engaging in the Conference on Cooperation among East Asian countries for Palestinian development to support Palestine in its development and capacity building and human resources development, so as to lay groundwork for Palestine to become a viable, secure, and democratic state. I thank you.
Je remercie le représentant permanent de la Thaïlande et je donne la parole à son Excellence Obaid Salam Al-Zahabi, représentant permanent des Émirats Arabes Unis. Ambassadeur Zahabi, vous avez la parole.
معالي الدكتور نبيل شعث مفوض العلاقات الدولية لحركة فتح، سعادة فودي سالك رئيس لجنة الأمم المتحدة المعنية بحقوق الشعب الفلسطيني غير قابل للتصرف، سعادة مايكل مولر مدير العام لمكتب الأمم المتحدة بجنيف، أصحاب السعادة السيدات والسادة، يسرني باسم دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة أن أتوجه إلى لجنة الأمم المتحدة المعنية بحقوق الشعب الفلسطيني غير القابل للتصرف بأصدق عبارات الشكر والتقدير لجهودها المخلصة والبناء من أجل توسيع إدراك المجتمع الدولي بتطورات القضية الفلسطينية العادلة بشكل عام، ولتنظيمها هذا المؤتمر الهادف إلى دعم السلام الإسرائيلي الفلسطيني في الوقت الذي بدأت فيه مبادرات جديدة لمعالجة هذه المسألة الحساسة والمؤثرة على المستوى الإقليمي والدولي. أود أن أذكر بأن مسلسل الانتهاكات التي ترتكبها إسرائيل القوى القائمة بالاحتلال لحقوق الإنسان الفلسطيني والسياسات الخطيرة التي تمعن في ارتكابها وممارسة المزيد من التحريض على الكراهية والقتل والاعتقال والتنكيل اليومي في القدس وفي المدن والقرى في الضفة الغربية المحتلة، وتنفيذها مخططاتها الاستيطانية المنهجية لاستيلاء على المزيد من الأراضي والممتلكات والثروات الفلسطينية وطرد وتهجير الفلسطينيين من أراضي آبائهم وأجدادهم بمن فيهم متشبثين بأرضهم التي احتلتها منذ عام 1948، إضافة إلى إبعاد الأنظار عن سياسة حصار غير إنساني ممتدة منذ عام 2006 لقطاع غزة الذي لا يزال يعاني سكانه حتى اللحظة الحرمان والمحنة لفداحة الدمار الذي ألحقته آلتها الحربية بأغلبية أحيائه السكنية ومؤسساته وبنيته التحتية الأساسية. يمثل عائقا كبيرا أمام كل المحاولات الخيرة لإحلال السلام والأمن في المنطقة برمتها، خاصة وأن كل هذه الإجراءات ودون استثناء تعد باطلة ولاغية وغير قانونية وتشكل خرقا ماديا وقانونيا وسياسيا لأحكام القانون الدولي والقانون الإنساني الدولي واتفاقية جنيف الرابعة لعام 1949 وقرارات الشرعية الدولية، ولا سيما القرارين 242 و 338 ومبدأ الأرض مقابل السلام. أصحاب السعادة السيدات والسادة، أن دولة الإمارات تجدد في هذا اليوم موقفها الثابت والمبدئي في مساندتها لحقوق الشعب الفلسطيني غير القابل للتصرف وبضرورة الاعتراف الدولي الكامل بدولته المستقلة ذات السيادة وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية، وتدعم بكل قوة الجهود الرامية إلى تحقيق التسوية العادلة للقضية الفلسطينية. وعليه فإننا نحث الأمم المتحدة وأعضاء مجلس الأمن الفاعلين اليوم وأكثر من أي وقت مضى على التصرف على التصرف على نحو عاجل في إطار مبادئ الميثاق وقواعد القانون الدولي لتوفير الحماية اللازمة للشعب الفلسطيني وحمل سلطة الاحتلال على احترام كامل التزاماتها تجاهه. كما نطالب مجلس الأمن بالتحديد واللجنة الرباعية وشركائها الإقليميين بعمل كل ما في وسعهم لإنقاذ عملية السلام عبر إلزام إسرائيل بمعايير أساسية لمفاوضات جدية وذات معنى تستند مرجعيتها إلى أساس حل الدولتين وفقا للقرارات الشرعية الدولية ذات الصلة ومبادئ مدريد وأوسلو ومبادرة السلام العربية، وذلك لضمان التوصل في إطار زمني محدد إلى تسوية شاملة وعادلة ودائمة كفيلة بإنهاء مظاهر الاحتلال الإسرائيلي كافة وانسحابه من جميع الأراضي التي يحتلها منذ عام 1967 بما فيها القدس الشرقية، لإتاحة الفرصة لتحقيق الاستقلال الكامل للدولة الفلسطينية القابلة للحياة وعاصمتها القدس الشريف التي تعيش على جانب دولة إسرائيل بأمن وسلام دائمين. ونحذر بشدة في هذا السياق من أن فشل المجتمع الدولي والأمم المتحدة في إصلاح الوضع القائم والجائر والمتمثل بالاحتلال والاستيطان الإسرائيلي وانتهاكاته الصارخة لحقوق الإنسان التي جميعها أطالت من معاناة الشعب الفلسطيني وضاعفت من خسائره البشرية والمادية والاقتصادية على مدار ما يزيد عن 6 عقود ونصف، سيعمق أكثر من حالة الإحباط واليأس وعدم الاستقرار التي أسهمت في ظهور العنف والتطرف والإرهاب الخطير تأثرت من منطقتنا والعالم بأسره. أصحاب السعادة، السيدات والسادة، ترحب دولة الإمارات بانضمام دولة فلسطين للعديد من الاتفاقيات الدولية خلال السنتين الماضيتين وتشجعها على المضي قدما في هذا الاتجاه باعتبار أن التمسك بالقانون هو أساس الشرعية الدولية والوسيلة المثلى للنضال السلمي، علما بأن هذا الانضمام سيعزز لا محالة مكانة دولة فلسطين على الصعيد الدولي ويساهم في الحفاظ على حقوق الشعب الفلسطيني. كما ترحب حكومة بلادي باعتراف عدد من الدول الأوروبية بدولة فلسطين وتعرب عن أملها في الحصول على اعتراف أخرى، خاصة وأن العديد من المجالس البرلمانية الأوروبية قدمت توصيات بأن تعترف حكوماتها بدولة فلسطين. ختاما، نهيب بالمجتمع الدولي وبصفة خاصة الدول المانحة بمضاعفة الدعم والمساعدات السياسية والإنمائية والاقتصادية والإغاثية التي تقدمها إلى أبناء الشعب الفلسطيني للتخفيف من معاناته المتفاقمة يوما بعد يوم جراء ممارسات الاحتلال ومساعدته على توفير فرص العيش الكريم أسوة بكل الشعوب، بالإضافة إلى رفع القيود على آلية إعادة الإعمار وخطط الأمم المتحدة لدعم الانتعاش الاقتصادي في قطاع غزة. وشكرا سيد الرئيس.
Je remercie l'ambassadeur représentant des Émirats arabes unis et je donne la parole à l'ambassadeur Faisal bin Abdullah Al-Henzab, représentant permanent du Qatar. Ambassadeur Henzab, vous avez la parole.
السيد الرئيس، أصحاب السعادة، السيدات والسادة، الحضور الكرام، أود في البداية أن أتوجه بالشكر إلى جميع الذين ساهموا في تنظيم واستضافة هذا المؤتمر لمناقشة دعم السلام العادل والشامل للقضية الفلسطينية، باعتبارها القضية مركزية ليس للأمة العربية والإسلامية فقط، بل لجميع الشرفاء في العالم، ولكونها أيضا آخر قضية استعمارية، حيث يعد استمرارها من وجهة نظرنا دون حل عادل ودائم وصمة عار في جبين المجتمع الدولي والإنسانية. كما نعبر عن أملنا في أن يسهم نتائج هذا المؤتمر بدعم الجهود الرامية والحثيثة للتوصل إلى السلام في منطقة الشرق الأوسط. السيد الرئيس، لقد مرت على القضية الفلسطينية منذ 68 عام بمراحل مأساوية عديدة، بدأت باحتلال واغتصاب إسرائيل القوة القائمة بالاحتلال للأرض الفلسطينية وتشريد وتهجير أهلها، مرورا بحروب نتج عنها احتلال إسرائيل لمزيد من الأراضي، وصولا إلى اتفاقيات ومؤتمرات للسلام ووضع خرائط طريق وعدوان وحصار على غزة ومفاوضات لأكثر من عقدين من الزمن بدون التوصل إلى حل نهائي. الأمر الذي أدى إلى بث روح اليأس لدى فلسطينيين من وعود فارقة قطعها المجتمع الدولي. وهنا علينا أن نحذر من أن استمرار الفشل في التوصل إلى حل عادل ودائم وشامل لهذه القضية ستكون له عواقب وخيمة على منطقة الشرق الأوسط والعالم أجمع. السيد الرئيس، أن الانتهاكات والجرائم التي ترتكبها إسرائيل بحق الشعب الفلسطيني والسياسات الاستيطانية والممارسات العنصرية والتصريحات الحكومية الإسرائيلية التي تعارض عملية السلام ومبدأ حل الدولتين وقيام دولة فلسطينية مستقلة، تكشف عن حقيقة التوجه لدى المسؤولين الإسرائيليين بإجهاض جميع الجهود والمحاولات الرامية لتحقيق السلام وتقويض أي فرص للتسوية السلمية على أساس حل الدولتين، وتزيد من حدة الاحتقان وحالة التوتر في المنطقة. السيد الرئيس، نؤكد في دولة قطر على أن السلام العادل والشامل في الشرق الأوسط هو خيار استراتيجي، وأن شرط تحقيقه هو انتهاء الاحتلال للأراضي الفلسطينية والعربية المحتلة وفق جدول زمني محدد، وتمكين الشعب الفلسطيني من ممارسة حقوقه غير القابلة للتصرف وفقا لميثاق الأمم المتحدة، بما فيها حقه في تقرير المصير وإقامة دولة فلسطين المستقلة كاملة السيادة والقابلة للحياة وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية، استنادا إلى مبادرة السلام العربية وقرارات شرعية دولية ذات صلة. وعليه يتوجب على المجتمع الدولي وخاصة مجلس الأمن تحمل مسؤولياته القانونية والإنسانية والأخلاقية والتحلي بالإرادة السياسية الفاعلة لاتخاذ موقف حازم يلزم إسرائيل باستحقاقات السلام، والالتزام بتنفيذ القرارات الشرعية الدولية التي تقر للشعب الفلسطيني استعادة حقوقه الوطنية المشروعة وإقامة الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة على حدود 1967 وفق لمبدأ حل الدولتين. كما على المجتمع الدولي إنهاء سياسات الإفلات من العقاب التي تتمتع بها إسرائيل ومحاسبتها ومساءلتها على إمعانها في انتهاك القوانين والاتفاقيات الدولية وتحدي الإرادة الدولية بشكل فاضح. في الختام، تجدد دولة قطر موقفها وسياستها الثابتة في دعم القضية الفلسطينية والشعب الفلسطيني وحقوقه المشروعة باعتبارها حقوقا أصيلة لا يمكن التهاون أو التقصير في حمايتها وتعزيزها. شكرا السيد الرئيس.
Je remercie le représentant de l'État du Qatar et je donne la parole à l'ambassadeur représentant permanent de l'Indonésie. Madame Triono Wibono. Madame Wibono, vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to begin by commending you and the United Nations Committee on the exercise of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people for the steadfast commitment in supporting the struggle of Palestinian people. As a member and vice chair of the committee, Indonesia will continue playing its substantial roles in the exercise of the committee's mandate. I would also like to appreciate the Division for Palestinian Rights for its assistance to the committee and for its role in the further dissemination of Palestinian cause. Mr. Chairman, the convening of this conference is high time amidst this sentiment of the international community that the political process between Palestine and Israel should be restarted. Last month, key actors in the global effort to restart the political process met in Paris. The meeting and its outcome are critical as they reflect the enduring international commitment for peace in Palestine. We also see other similar efforts aiming at convincing Palestine and Israel that peace is possible and reviving the political process. In March this year, Indonesia hosted an extraordinary summit of the OIC on Palestine and Al-Quds al-Sharif. The summit asserted that status quo ante is unacceptable and that Israeli occupations must be ended. We must capitalize all these efforts. The committee is well placed to encourage all key actors to transform their political commitments into reality. In that regard, Mr. Chairman, I wish to share with you Indonesian views. First, sustained and concerted efforts are needed to bring Palestine and Israel return to the negotiating table. Instead of reinventing the wheel, we must be able to build on the previous initiative and maintain the momentum of support for both parties. A comprehensive, just, and lasting solutions can be achieved peacefully on the basis of relevant United Nations resolutions, the roadmap of Quartet, and the Arab Peace Initiative. Second, the international alliance against Israeli occupations must be strengthened. The role of non-state actors must be further elevated. Youth organizations, interfaith institutions, media, and other moderate civil society organizations have the capacities to build a common and strong narrative for peace, which encompasses both Palestine and Israel communities. We are heartened to note that this conference will also discuss the role of civil society in furthering the political process. We look forward to a fruitful discussion in this regard. Third, a credible political process necessitates a trust among the parties concerned. Accordingly, actions that undermine confidence building must be ended, notably violence and settlement construction. All channels of communications to both parties must be utilized to make sure they understand the consequences of their actions. And fourth, the responsibility of the UN Security Council remains paramount. The Council must honor the charters and stop being in the sideline of the impasse in the Palestine-Israeli conflict. To conclude, Mr. Chairman, let me reiterate the call on the international community to stand with the children of Palestine and Israel and work together to restart the political process. Let us give those children the future they deserve, peace and prosperity. I thank you.
Je remercie le représentant de l'Indonésie et je donne la parole à l'ambassadeur représentant permanent du Soudan.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. في البداية نشكر اللجنة على عملها الدؤوب، ونرحب بمشاركة الأخ نبيل شاث وفده الكريم، ونشكر ممثل الأمين العام السيد مولر على الكلمة. يضم السودان صوته إلى المجموعتين العربية والإسلامية، ويرحب بعقد هذا المؤتمر، ويجدد التأكيد على مبادئ الأمم المتحدة المتعلقة بانتهاج السلم وإنهاء حالة الحرب والاحتلال لكافة الدول والشعوب وحقها الكامل في تقرير مصيرها. أوصت اللجنة المكونة بواسطة مجلس الأمن في تقريرها في مايو 1976 أن قضية فلسطين هي جوهر مشكلة الشرق الأوسط، ولا حل لمشاكل الشرق الأوسط بدون حل القضية الفلسطينية. ويمكن القول أن كل المشاكل التي تشهدها المنطقة اليوم سببها الرئيسي عدم حل القضية الفلسطينية. سيد الرئيس، القرارات المتعلقة بفلسطين لا تجد أذنا صاغية، وإسرائيل مستمرة في سياستها باحتلال الأرض ومشاريع الاستيطان غير القانونية، مما يعتبر خرقا للمادة 49 من اتفاقية جنيف. وترفض إسرائيل اتفاقية السلام العربية التي قدمت في القمة العربية ببيروت عام 2002 ميلادية، والتي تقوم على الأرض مقابل السلام. نحن نستغرب مما جاء في خطاب الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة في افتتاحية هذا المؤتمر، والذي يساوي فيه بين الجزار والضحية، ونتساءل ما الذي يمكن أن تفعله القيادة الفلسطينية أكثر مما فعلته حتى الآن. قطاع غزة المحتل يخضع لحصار غير قانوني ولا إنساني منذ أكثر من 9 أعوام، والأمم المتحدة عاجزة عن فعل شيء لوقف الحصار الإسرائيلي على القطاع. يطالب وفد السودان بوقف النشاط الاستيطاني وإطلاق سراح كافة الأسرى، خاصة الأطفال والنساء وأعضاء الهيئة التشريعية، وحق الشعب الفلسطيني في تقرير مصيره وإعلان دولته المستقلة وعاصمتها القدس الشريف. ختاما، السلام لا يمكن تحقيقه إلا إذا غيرت إسرائيل سياستها الاحتلالية، وغيرت الأمم المتحدة مساواتها بين المعتدي والمعتدى عليه. ونأمل أن لا يكون هذا المؤتمر كغيره من المؤتمرات لا يقدم ولا يؤخر في مأساة الشعب الفلسطيني، بل مزيدا من التسويف والتخدير. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Je remercie le représentant du Soudan et je donne la parole au représentant permanent du Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Let me also recognize the presence of Mr. Nabeel Shaath, representative of the State of Palestine. My delegation welcomes the initiative by the United Nations Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People to organize this timely and important conference on the aptly forward-looking theme, Peace is Possible, Frameworks for a Way Forward. Indeed, it is obvious to us that negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians towards a two-state solution are the only viable option to end the current conflict and to achieve a sustainable and durable peace. It is hugely disturbing that following the collapse of the most recent peace talks in 2014, violence has escalated while hope is fading. This is why we highly commend the decision to focus discussions in this forum on finding possible frameworks for a way forward to revive the peace process. We therefore reiterate our call on all the relevant players to put their heads together to create conditions for a durable peace process. Specifically, the major powers have a distinct opportunity and responsibility to present a set of incentives and guarantees and to cajole and pressure Israel to return to the negotiating table. For its part, Israel is implored to climb down from its stated position of preference for only direct negotiations and embrace the idea of an international framework that this conference seeks to fashion out. It is a format that my delegation fully endorses as a necessary tool to save the peace process. Furthermore, we call on Israel to put a halt to its settlement activities in the occupied West Bank, which remain a major bone of contention for the Palestinians as new settlements continue to encircle and cut off Palestinian villages from their neighbors. Finally, we look forward to fruitful exchanges as a positive outcome is expected from this conference, which will also be a precursor to putting this burning issue to a rest. I thank you, Chair.
Je remercie le représentant permanent du Zimbabwe et je donne la parole au représentant permanent du Mali, Madame Ahia. Madame l'ambassadeur, vous avez la parole.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président du Comité pour l'exercice des droits inaliénables du peuple palestinien, Monsieur le représentant de l'État de Palestine, Mesdames, Messieurs les ambassadeurs, Mesdames, Messieurs, le Mali salue l'initiative du Comité d'organiser la présente conférence internationale à l'appui de la paix au processus israélo-palestinien et voudrait adresser ses vives félicitations au Comité pour cette initiative. Le Mali souscrit pleinement à la déclaration faite par l'organisation de la conférence islamique. Le thème de la présente conférence, à savoir la paix est possible, définir les orientations pour aller de l'avant, nous semble opportun et arrive à un moment où le processus a besoin d'un nouveau souffle. Le Mali a toujours soutenu les processus de paix engagés pour que le peuple palestinien puisse effectivement jouir d'un État aux côtés de l'État d'Israël. Une solution fondée sur deux États. Nous pensons également que les souffrances de la population palestinienne, du peuple palestinien dans les régions occupées, doivent trouver un terme. Aujourd'hui, nous exhortons la communauté internationale à fournir l'aide au peuple palestinien pour atténuer ses souffrances et lui permettre de vivre dignement. Le Mali voudrait, à ce stade, appeler la communauté internationale à garantir un environnement propice aux négociations et à faire en sorte que la question palestinienne puisse trouver une réponse. Je vous remercie.
Je remercie Madame l'ambassadeur, représentant permanent du Mali. Et je donne la parole à l'ambassadeur représentant permanent de Oman. Oman, you have the floor.
معالي فودي سيك رئيس اللجنة المعنية، معالي نبيل شعث ممثل دولة فلسطين، أصحاب السعادة الكرام، يسرني باسم سلطنة عمان أن نرحب بعقد هذا المؤتمر المعني بدعم السلام الفلسطيني الإسرائيلي من أجل إرساء دعائم السلام، مؤكدين دعمنا في كل ما من شأنه أن يؤدي إلى الأهداف المرجوة لإنهاء الاحتلال وإرساء السلام، حيث أن سلطنة عمان تؤمن بالسلام وتسعى إليه وتدعو إلى تقوية الصداقة على أسس من العدل الشامل والاحترام المتبادل مع الجميع، وتدعو الدول للعمل على محاربة الظلم والاستبداد والتطهير العرقي وامتهان الكرامة الإنسانية، وعلى مجابهة احتلال أراضي الغير وإنكار الحقوق المشروعة. وقد سعت بلادي وما زالت تدعم الجهود العربية والدولية لإيجاد التسوية للصراع العربي الإسرائيلي عبر إيجاد حل عادل وشامل لإنهاء احتلال إسرائيل للأراضي العربية، وهي في هذا المجال دعمت عملية السلام بين العرب وإسرائيل منذ انطلاقتها عام 1991 والجهود المبذولة لتسوية الصراع وفق قرارات الشرعية الدولية، كما أيدت مبادرة السلام العربية لعام 2002 لدعم جهود الشعب الفلسطيني لنيل حقوقه المشروعة في إقامة دولته المستقلة وفق مبادئ القانون الدولي وقرارات الشرعية الدولية، وذلك وفق إطار زمني محدد يفضي إلى قيام الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة وعاصمتها القدس على حدود 4 يونيو عام 1967. أصحاب المعالي، أصحاب السعادة، تثمن بلادي عاليا الجهود الإقليمية والدولية الداعمة والمحبة للسلام، ولوعيها وإدراكها بأن استقرار ورفاه الشعب لا يتأتى إلا بالحوار والسلام، خاصة في ظل ما تشهده منطقتنا العربية من عدم استقرار وتدهور على مختلف الصعد السياسية والاجتماعية والاقتصادية، والتي كان الاحتلال الإسرائيلي سببا قويا لها. فإن السلام بين الإسرائيليين والفلسطينيين يكمن حله في إيجاد دولة فلسطينية مستقلة على حدود عام 1967 إلى جوار دولة إسرائيل لتعيشا في سلام باحترام الكامل لميثاق الأمم المتحدة وفق قرارات الشرعية الدولية، وبالإفراج عن الأسرى وحل مشكلة اللاجئين وفق القرار 194 ومبادرة السلام العربية، الذي سيكون له انعكاسا إيجابيا على الجانبين الفلسطيني والإسرائيلي والمنطقة العربية ومنطقة الشرق الأوسط برمتها، وسيضمن الأمن والاستقرار للجميع. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، إن بلادي ترى إن من واجب الجميع الحث على الالتزام بمبادئ التعايش السلمي بين الدول واحترام القانون الدولي والقرارات الشرعية الدولية، والعمل على إرساء دعائم السلام والتخفيف من معاناة الشعب ودعمها في الحصول على حقها في تقرير المصير، لا سيما إذا كان الأمر يتعلق بأطول احتلال عرفته البشرية في عصرنا الحالي. وبهذا ندعو المجتمع الدولي باستمرار جهوده وإلزام إسرائيل القوى القائمة بالاحتلال على الالتزام بالقانون الدولي بما يقود إلى سلام وإلى إنهاء احتلالها للأراضي العربية وفق المبادئ التي أقرها المجتمع الدولي استنادا إلى قرارات الأمم المتحدة ذات الصلة. وفي هذا الخصوص نجدد دعمنا للمبادرات السابقة والمبادرة الفرنسية الحالية التي من شأنها أن تؤدي إلى حل الدولتين لصالح كافة الأطراف حتى يعيش المجتمع الدولي في سلام واستقرار. نعم، ونقول معكم السلام ممكن، وشكرا.
Je remercie le représentant permanent de Oman et je donne la parole au représentant permanent de la Jordanie. Jordan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, the Jordanian delegation strongly condemns yesterday's terrorist attack at Ataturk Airport. It expresses solidarity with the Turkish government and people in the face of terrorism and extremism, and presents its condolences to the government of Turkey and the families of the victims, and wishes those injured speedy recovery. Mr. Chairman, in his address to the American Congress on the 7th of March 2007, His Majesty King Abdullah II regenerated international attention and focus on the Palestinian-Israeli peace process at a time when international attention on this pre-ordinal issue declined in favor of other regional challenges then. The King's speech underscored and stressed the reality that the lack of Palestinian-Israeli peace remains a core problem in the region, and that only resolving this conflict will facilitate the resolution of other regional issues and threats. Today, as never before, the Palestinian issue remains the central cause for regional and international challenges and threats. The deadlock that has dominated the peacemaking efforts deepens feelings of despair and feeds extremist tendencies and threatens the security and stability of the region and the world. Accordingly, it is imperative that we spare no effort to resume direct, committed, timelined, and meaningful peace negotiations based on the Arab Peace Initiative and the relevant UN resolutions. Mr. Chairman, the establishment of an independent and fully sovereign Palestinian state on the 4th of June 1967 lines with East Jerusalem as its capital on Palestinian national soil remains a vital national interest for Jordan. Jordan is a stakeholder in all core issues: security, water, borders, refugees, and Jerusalem, and the resolution of those issues must fully safeguard and satisfy Jordan's vital national interests associated with all of those core issues, especially refugees and Jerusalem, and as part of a two-state solution based on the terms of reference of peace, the peace process, and the relevant UN resolutions, including relevant Security Council resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative. Jordan therefore supports all diplomatic efforts to realize a two-state solution and revive the Palestinian-Israeli peace talks, including the most recent French initiative, emphasizing the need in this regard to closely coordinate all such efforts and initiatives to ensure that they flow into one common direction. Mr. Chairman, the success of any initiative or negotiations requires a full hiatus and halt to all unilateral measures, especially Israeli settlement activity, attacks on civilians, and all unilateral Israeli measures and violations in the occupied Palestinian territories, especially in East Jerusalem and the Islamic, Christian, and holy sites. Incursions and incidents undertaken by Israel, like the most recent in East Jerusalem, are most detrimental and destructive. Moreover, efforts to achieve peace and to realize a two-state solution should not be held hostage to the Israeli domestic politics and government coalition dynamics, while Palestinian territory continues to be swallowed. We also believe that an accompanying international mechanism to those negotiations needs to be crafted to assist and encourage the two parties to cross the finish line and to hold them accountable for any obstructions or abdication of their responsibilities or conducting any action or omission that may obstruct those negotiations or lead to their collapse. Today's meeting will help us, Mr. Chairman, take stock of what has been done to date and try to envisage a path for peace. It is one of a number of initiatives, and as we try to envisage how to proceed forward in this path, we need to chart a clear path, one that would lead to the realization and the crystallization of the two-state solution, and as outlined before in this intervention. Finally, I stress that you can count, all of you, on us, as always, on Jordan, to support every sincere effort that will bring us closer to this goal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Je remercie l'ambassadeur représentant permanent de la Jordanie et je donne la parole à l'ambassadeur représentant permanent de Malta. Malta.
Mr. President, Excellencies, in the present stalemate of the Middle East peace process, Malta welcomes this conference largely as a result of new international momentum generated by the French Conference on the Middle East, which we support. Direct negotiations between Israel and Palestine are essential to progress and to a way forward. International efforts aimed at creating new dynamics around the peace process fostering the right conditions for the two sides to engage in meaningful direct discussions are therefore to be welcomed. Parameters and target dates defining the basis for negotiations are key elements for a successful outcome of the negotiations. It must be said that ongoing settlement activity is not conducive to peace negotiations. Indeed, settlement activity endangers and imperils the two-state solution and serves as an inherent obstacle to progress in this sphere. The situation in Gaza remains of deep concern. The living conditions of the people in Gaza are dire. Fundamental change is needed to the political, security, and economic challenges in Gaza. As long as living conditions remain as they are, no improvement may be expected in the general political situation. On the track of frameworks for a way forward, we eagerly anticipate the publication of the Quartet report, its insight and evaluations, as well as the recommendations aimed at maintaining the two-state solution as a viable goal. We hope that this report will serve to further galvanize the international community in the path towards peace. In conclusion, Malta hopes that the momentum built over the past months, thanks to the French initiative, will continue to gain ground. We need to reinforce our collective efforts in view of the urgency to overcome the political impasse. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the representative of Malta. I give the floor to the representative of permanent representative of Lebanon. Lebanon, you have the floor.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. سيد الرئيس، سنة 2002 في بيروت مد الجانب العربي يده للسلام مع إسرائيل على أساس مبادرة السلام العربية، ومؤخرا رحب الجانب العربي بالمبادرة الفرنسية التي تسعى إلى عقد مؤتمر دولي للسلام في الشرق الأوسط على أساس مبدأ الدولتين. ما برح العرب بفعل مبادرات عديدة يمدون يدهم للسلام، لكن إسرائيل بسياساتها المتعنتة وانتهاكاتها أجهضت المسار في مهده، فهي من فكت ببناء المستوطنات واحتلال الأراضي وطرد السكان من منازلهم وهدمها وأسر وقتل الأبرياء وتغيير هوية القدس وتهويدها وبناء الجدران العنصرية وفرض الحصار على الأبرياء والعزل، مستبيحة جميع المواثيق والشرائع والقوانين الدولية. إن المجتمع الدولي مدعو إلى العمل والضغط على إسرائيل لجعلها تلاقي الأيادي العربية الممدودة بغية التوصل إلى إحلال سلام دائم وشامل وعادل في منطقتنا، منطقة الشرق الأوسط، وذلك على أساس مبدأ الدولتين، إقامة دولة فلسطينية مستقلة عاصمتها القدس الشرقية بحدود عام 1967، وانسحاب إسرائيل من جميع الأراضي المحتلة تنفيذاً لقرارات الشرعية الدولية ذات الصلة. شكراً سيد الرئيس.
Je remercie la représentante permanente du Liban et je donne la parole au représentant permanent du Nicaragua. Je donne la parole au représentant. His name. The name was here. South Africa. Okay, the Nicaragua skips his the floor. I give the floor to the representative of South Africa. South Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Chair, let me take this opportunity to also recognize the presence of the Palestinian representative, Dr. Nabeel Shaath, in our midst. Thank you to the Committee on the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People for convening this very useful discussion. The committee has been very effective in hosting timely and relevant discussions on the various aspects of this conflict. The discussion in Stockholm recently on the impact of the Israeli occupation on development in the occupied Palestinian territories was particularly useful as we begin the global process of implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. Before we begin, I wish to express South Africa's heartfelt condolences to the government and the people of the Republic of Turkey following the terror attack on Istanbul's Ataturk airport last evening, which claimed the lives of so many innocent people, leaving many people injured. President Zuma today stated that South Africa shares in the grief of the Turkish people and the international community following the substantial loss of life and wishes the injured survivors a speedy recovery. Terrorism in any form and from whatever quarters cannot be condoned. Mr. Chair, this meeting today is particularly timely. It is being convened at a time when the two-state solution is being seriously threatened by heightened tension and sporadic acts of violence between Palestinians and Israelis. The increased construction of illegal settlements in occupied territories and the escalating frustration amongst Palestinians due to the lack of visible progress on the Middle East peace process. Mr. Chair, my government concurs with what has been said here today, that the central responsibility for peace is primarily in the hands of Palestinians and Israelis themselves. The international community should support and encourage them towards this endeavor. We assert that dialogue and negotiation remains the only way forward. As Dr. Nabeel Shaath so eloquently said, there is no option for peace to be possible except through honest dialogue. The international legal framework, which include United Nations General Assembly and Security Council resolutions, the Madrid Principles, the Arab Peace Plan, and the Quartet Roadmap, to name a few, provide the guidelines for these negotiations. In this regard, the French initiative is welcome. As South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Minister Nkwana Mashabane, stated at the Paris meeting that this initiative, the French initiative, is like a first raindrop in a long drought, and we hope it will nourish the peace process. Mr. Chair, the late President Nelson Mandela stated that the freedom of South Africa is incomplete as long as Palestine is not free. Therefore, South Africa will remain engaged with the situation in the Middle East and stands ready to make its contributions in the realization of that peace. In the past, South Africa initiated dialogues between different groups of Palestinians and Israelis, during which we shared South Africa's experience in negotiations, peace building, constitution building, and the transition to democratic